please come to order. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mandy, could you please call the roll?
Here.
Vanderhorst.
Here.
Danstra.
Here.
Carlstone.
Here.
Hopkins.
Here.
Spore. Here.
Could I get a motion for approval of the tentative agenda?
So moved.
Support. Vanstra, Hopkins, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Danstra.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. I'd like to appoint Michael Freeze to the Ad Hoc Committee for Community Center Improvements as a result of staff and the current committee requesting an additional member be appointed. Michael is a local architect who resides in Pella. He has experience with renovating historic buildings. Can I get a motion for approval?
Support.
Who was that, Banster? Oh, Hopkins and Branderhorst. Discussion. Michael is here. If anybody wants to ask him any questions or anything, appreciate his offer to volunteer to help with this project. Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Danstra.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Motion passed. Now is an opportunity for a public forum. Anyone wishing to address council regarding anything that's on the agenda this evening, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and address, and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I'd like to open the meeting with prayer. Dear Lord, our just and almighty God, we come to you tonight with heavy hearts as our community mourns the tragic accident of a little child and of the sudden passing of another one of our prominent citizens. We ask you to give us comfort and strength to those struggling with it. We ask you to look over this council meeting tonight, and we ask your blessing upon this city. We ask you that your wisdom may be reflected and the best judgment may come forward. Amen.
Ready to vote? 9:15 a.m. If I read right, you're going to be discussing the fees for Boss Lyman tonight.
Yeah.
You fussed about how much the ambulance was going to cost us, $750,000. It's paid by taxpayers. It's used by all. Yes, it's a lot of money, but it's used by all. Our swimming pool does not make money. It goes in the red every year, but it is used by all. Boss Landon never has made a profit. Last year it ran $400,000 in the red, and it's used by a very limited number of people, and is paid by all the taxpayers. And that's a lot of money for very limited use. I'd like to see something done about it. Golf courses are closing all over the country because they can't afford to be kept up.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we'll move on. Can I get a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved. Support.
Vanstra, DeYoung. Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Danstra.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to a public hearing on the proposal to convey easement interest in real property through option agreements to Mid-American Energy Company. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. I'd like to direct everyone's attention to the big board for a presentation on these two items that we're considering this evening. As Mayor DeWard stated, the purpose of tonight's hearing is to consider proposed easements provided to Mid-American Energy. Now, this will be best explained by the map we're getting ready to show here very shortly, but Mid-American is in the process of upgrading and replacing and ultimately relocating the 69,000 volt transmission line that's just west, that runs on the western side of through this process and the process of relocating the line, Mid-American Energy discovered that it did not have easements by the City of Pella for the existing transmission line. So what we're proposing tonight is granting existing easements to the transmission facilities that Mid-American currently owns and is currently on city properties. It's important to note that the city attorney has reviewed both of these easement documents and has approved them as well. So Mandy, let's go ahead and show the map on the big board. Now, as far as the transmission lines are concerned, they're really everything that you see in this green highlighted area here. Part of the existing transmission lines when we get on the east side of Highway 163 that ultimately connect up to the diesel generating and the substation plant that's just outside the diesel generating plant on Washington Street are located overhead. Once we cross 163 and come just north of the airport, they go underground right here. And ultimately what Mid-American is doing, if you're to follow the existing transmission line, as soon as it gets past the airport, it's overhead and goes up through the Prairie Ridge development. What Mid-American is proposing to do is upgrade this transmission line, which is needed from a reliability standpoint. And they're also proposing to place the transmission line that's currently located in the Prairie Ridge subdivision in the public right-of-way along Highway 163. There will also be some private property that will be used here as well by Mid-American. So with that, that is Mid-American's plans. And once again, what we're simply documenting or providing Mid-American is an easement for the transmission lines to be on city property. They've been there for a number of years. And overall, from the city's standpoint, the upgrade of the transmission line is a key reliability issue for the City of Pella on it as far as the transmission issue, because it connects directly to our west substation that's just outside the diesel generating plant. So with that, Mr. Mayor, our recommendation is approval of both easements tonight.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Any written comments, Mandy?
No written comments.
Council, comments, questions?
I guess the only question I had, why are they going the option route and then the easement route? Why don't they just buy the easement right now? Because it's a 12-month option, and then they can exercise that option within the 12 months. And wouldn't it make sense just to buy the option?
Yeah. In dealing with Mid-American, and Nate Spurgeon is on the phone, I may let him answer that as well. But dealing with Mid-American, it's important to note that these are somewhat similar forms for all easements that they have.
Okay.
While that may make sense to do that, as you're stating right here in our case, it may not make sense in other property owners that they're dealing with along the right of way.
Okay. So your anticipation is you're going to get a check for the whole thing?
Well, I think that's, yeah, that's yet to be determined. So.
Okay. It just seemed a little bit different for me, but I'm not Warren Buffett.
Okay, anything else? Questions, comments? Any comments from the audience? And tonight, if you do want to make comment, please come up here, because we try to broadcast this over PTV. We need you to speak into that mic so we can get the audio on the TV.
Existing route, that existing 69 kV line is on. Is that by easement now? Is the city on that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Mr. Steve Out. And it's our understanding with the transmission line that we have right here, what Mid-American discovered when they looked to relocate this route is that they felt they did not have formal easements by the City of Pella. So in reality, since the easement has been there a number of years, the transmission lines have been on city property a number of years, it could be argued that they have conscripted the easement now. And what they're simply doing is documenting the easement.
How about farther to the west?
That I'm not sure of. I can only talk about what's on city property and what they've notified us on this, but farther to the west through the Prairie Ridge subdivision,
Right.
I'm not sure if they've had formal easements on those either on it, or if it'd be conscripted easements on it. So
But that was by the landowner originally?
Yes.
A deal that Mid-Am made?
Yeah, it would have had to been, since it's on private property, there would have had to been some sort of agreement with private property owners.
Okay, anyone else? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Young, Hopkins, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Young,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Spore, yes. Reindeerhorst,
Yes.
Danstruck,
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to resolution number 6550, entitled Resolution Approving and Authorizing the Conveyance of Easement Real Property through option agreements to Mid-American Energy Company. I'm sure there's nothing to add, Mike.
That is correct.
Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Branderhorst, DeYoung, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to a public hearing on the proposal to convey interest in real property by quitclaim deed to Pella Timberview LLC. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, once again, I'd like to direct everyone's attention to the big board for a presentation on this item. As Mayor DeWard stated, what we're entertaining this evening is conveyance of documented right-of-way to Timberview LLC, Pella Timberview LLC. A little bit of background and just orientation on the area that we're considering conveying this evening would be this area right here, this road located right here is East Park Lane. Hazel Street is just to the south. And just to the north of East Park Lane is the proposed new residential housing division for this subdivision for the City of Pella. That is the Timberview subdivision. Late last year, the City Council did approve a development agreement for a 36-unit housing development that is really in this black highlighted area up here. The issue at hand is when we look at this proposed right-of-way and conveyance this evening, what we believe is there is an easement or identified right-of-way that's this yellow highlighted area that's in phase 1 of the development. That's the area that we're considering conveying this evening or proposing to convey this evening. If you recall, when we approved our development agreement with Timberview LLC, Hazel Street had a different alignment, actually went up to the northwest. And so what is being proposed by their attorneys this evening is to convey the property, and what that would allow them to do is actually build a 36-unit housing development up here, because right now we have right-of-way across part of the property. And then in terms of the development agreement, once Timberview constructs the road or constructs the Hazel Street extension, they're required under the development agreement to dedicate that back to the City of Pella at no cost. And so what's being proposed this evening is to convey the property in the yellow highlighted area. Once Hazel Street is constructed and goes out to the northwest, the developers will dedicate the property back to the City of Pella, and that will be the new Hazel Street right-of-way. So this old right-of-way is no longer needed. In fact, this conveyance is needed this evening to be able to proceed with that 36-unit housing subdivision that we have. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I believe that concludes our presentation this evening. We're more than happy to answer any questions the Mayor or Council may have on this item.
All right, thank you, Mike. Any written comments, Mandy?
No written comments.
Council, questions, comments? Any member of the audience have a comment on this particular item? All right, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Bandstra, Hopkins, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on, resolution number 6551, entitled Resolution Approving and Authorizing the Conveyance of Interest in Real Property by Quitclaim Deed to Pella Timberview LLC. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. We're considering a new Class C retail alcohol license with outdoor service for the City of Pella, doing business as Boss Land Golf Course. Mike?
I guess, Mr. Mayor, a little bit of background on this. The Boss Lawn Golf Course will be operated by the City of Pella this year, and as a result, we are applying for a Class C liquor license, and the proposed date would be effective March 8th of this year. It's important to note that the term of the new license would be 12 months, and if approved by Council, would actually expire on March 7th, 2024. The application has been completed online with the State of Iowa, and staff is recommending approval this evening.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6552, entitled Resolution Approving Boss Lawn Golf Course Fees. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. It's very important to note what this resolution would do is actually improve the golf fees or the proposed golf fees for the Boss London Golf Course for calendar year 2023. Equally important to note, we discussed these fees in depth during the work session on February 7th. The proposed fees are the same fees that we discussed on February 7th for it. And in summary, we feel that they are very comparable to similar courses as Boss London from a market standpoint. And as a result, city staff is recommending approval of this resolution this evening.
All right, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Score,
Yes.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
DeAnstruck,
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on, resolution number 6553, entitled Resolution Accepting Public Improvements for Shady Brook Acres Plat number 2. Mike?
I guess, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. As Mayor DeWard stated, what we're simply entertaining or what's being proposed this evening is to accept the public improvements for Shady Brook Plat 2. Now, it's the easiest way to explain this item when we talk about the public improvements. We have the summary that's listed up here on the big board, and it's also the public improvements that would be listed in this purple highlighted area. Shady Brook subdivision is located southwest of this. Well, it's not. It's within our corporate limits. It's in the southwest portion of the city on here. But ultimately, what this resolution, once again, or in summary rather, what this resolution does, it accepts the public infrastructure associated with the Shady Brook Plat 2. Also important to note that the maintenance bonds have been received by and for the project, and as a result, city staff is recommending approval of this resolution this evening.
All right, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval? Hopkins, Carlstone, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Carlstone,
Yes.
Score,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on, ordinance number 1026, entitled An Ordinance Amending Municipal Telecommunication Utility Rates in the City of Pella, Iowa. First reading. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item, and I would characterize this ordinance that we're considering this evening as a housekeeping item. And in essence, what it does is it removes the red highlighted area items from the ordinance. A little bit of background on this: we needed these items when Pella Fiber, or it was first introduced to the public, because at that time our Wi-Fi mesh extender also served as our ONT, but subsequently to that we purchased equipment that automatically provides the web mesh extender on it as well. So this does not have a financial impact to the City of Pella. It's just simply a housekeeping item that we have here this evening. And with this, Mr. Mayor, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that council may have on this proposed ordinance.
All right, can I get a motion for approval?
So moved. Support.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Score,
Yes.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
DeAnstruck,
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Since this is a housekeeping issue, I make a motion we suspend the rules and waive the second and third readings.
All right, Banstra, Hopkins. Any discussion on that motion? All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeAnstruck,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Score,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion to adopt?
Okay,
Support.
Banstra, Spore. Any discussion? All right, can I get all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeAnstruck,
Yes.
Score,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
Carlstone,
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on, abstract of bills number 2121. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved. Support.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion, questions? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Score,
Yes.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
DeAnstruck,
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Council have any other business you would like to bring to our attention this evening? Okay, any member of the public have any other business you'd like to bring to our attention this evening? If so, please step to the mic, state your name and address, and try to limit comments to 3 minutes.
Keith Oxburger, 224 South Street. So the city's got a cost issue. Cost went up for the city, and you want to raise taxes on your people. What do your people do when their cost goes up? They can't go to somebody to get extra money. They live paycheck to paycheck. They cut back. Maybe prioritize. Maybe don't build that new swimming pool they were thinking about. Maybe they've been wanting a boat. Maybe they put that off. A basketball court. Or any other new shiny projects. Your people just put it off and wait. You know, if things are tight, budget's tight, right, Mike? So, it was said we have $5.5 million in reserve. That was going to be used for the community center. And we're getting $2 million a year from the lost tax returns. That could surely be used to pay for the ambulance shortfall, can't it? And probably some left over after that, $2 million a year. Ambulance, that's quality of life, right? Or is that infrastructure? Either one. That's where that lost tax is going to go, right? You said you wanted to use $1.6 million of that lost tax for the next year for the next 20 years. That go a long ways in the budget. You're going to use that $1.6 million for the next 20 years on the rec center. Maybe now is not the time for a rec center. Maybe we should get our budget and pay our bills, get our ambulance, things like that done first. Please do not raise our taxes to force us to pay for a rec center. Let the rec center be paid for by those who want it. You don't even have half the money promised for that rec center yet. Not even half of it's raised. Maybe we should just kind of hold back on that. I'm hearing the county's not too hepped on chipping in on that too. There's been some changes at the county right now with leadership. Not like it was when we first talked about it. I'm also learning that some of the $12 million that's been promised is maybe in limbo. Because some of that was supposed to go to the community center, but maybe it's not at this time. So that's kind of up in the air too. So again, maybe we ought to take care of our ambulance, things like that, before we go for the swimming pools and shiny objects.
10 seconds, Keith.
So you guys have the money for city operations without the lost tax and reserve, so you don't really need to raise tax, because it's there if you look. If you guys can't show us your leadership skills by making it happen without raising taxes, then you leave us no choice but to this fall to find someone who can.
Okay.
It's your choice.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to me.
Anyone else?
Sorry, I forgot to do my name and address the first time. Risky about 762 118th Place. And I will thank you for the opportunity to address you. I've been a little bit distracted lately, but there's a couple projects that I think were very important to our community in the future. And one is the airport, could I get an update of where the airport is at? Is there anything happening, or what's, I mean, we're talking 40, 50 years down the road here where the advantage is gonna come. And to not pursue something like that, I think would be very short-sighted. I know it lost in the court of public opinion, which the Supreme Court followed. But where is it now? Are we pursuing anything? Has this council moved forward with that at all? Could you give me a brief synopsis, Michael? Or Don?
Go ahead, Mike.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to simply state that we plan to have an update for council this spring on the regional airport, the status of it.
It's alive.
Good, glad to hear that. I have one other thing, short thing here quickly, but having driven around town, and our traffic situation in the community is, especially at certain times of the day, is getting, well, really to the point of ridiculous. And has anybody, any council or anybody looked at possibly doing a traffic study? I'm not talking about a short-term traffic study, but a long-term traffic study. Do we have a plan? And you know, I know we've spent a lot of millions in assisting developers in town, but I don't think the developers are going to help the city with the traffic. That is the crux of government's duties. And I would love to see or some feedback or something. And maybe it's happening, and if it is, I apologize. But I just think, you know, you try and get on Washington Street or Oskaloosa Street at certain times of the day, and you can wait 10, 15 minutes. But thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bruce. Anyone else? All right, we're going to move into policy and planning session to first of all discuss the revised architectural design guidelines. We all have a copy of it. I know it was in our packet also, what the CDC and SHIFT have come up with. So, Mike, if you want to update us, and then we can have a discussion.
Yes, sir. And Mayor Ward stated what we're here to talk about this evening is the proposed revised design guidelines that have been developed by Shift Collective, as well as with the input of our Community Development Committee as well. But we do have Mr. Kurt Hagee in attendance from Shift to walk us through the proposed changes. And before Mr. Mayor, we turn the floor over to Kurt, I'd like to ask our Planning and Zoning Director, Jerry Bidas, if he has any additional comments for council before Kurt gives his presentation.
Sure, thank you. One thing I'd like to commend is our CDC commission members. They have taken the last 12 months, multiple meetings, sometimes 2 months, to come up with these revised guidelines. Kurt has been a wonderful leader for the CDC in advising them on how architectural renderings, rules, how that all fits, especially in Pella, which is a very unique community, to look at these kind of guidelines. And I would just like to, again, commend our CDC staff and Mr. Kurt Hagee for what we think are some premier document that is coming forward for you guys for your review, question, and ultimate approval. Thank you.
Okay. Kurt, we'll need you to speak into the mic if you can, so everybody that is interested can hear you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here today. I won't go into a lot of detail into the minutia. This has been shared with you folks and the community, so you've had the opportunity to review the more detailed approach. But what I wanted to convey was the sort of high-level goals that we were tasked with as a consultant to the city. Not only working with the CDC, but with city staff. What we were trying to do was not necessarily give your current edition of design guidelines a complete overhaul. What we were going to do was step it up a notch, make it a more usable document for the CDC when it comes to reviewing potential projects for a design permit per city process. We also wanted to make sure that we were bringing forward what's already working, tweaking what isn't quite working as well as maybe it needs to be, and also amping up a little more specificity. The final part of the document we were trying to achieve was to give the document graphics, an upgrade as well. We approached this as a tool to define Pella's heritage and identity as well. And so what you'll see as we move through, we can go ahead and go to the next one, is graphics that really, in our minds, speak to the heritage of the community that all the citizens are very proud of. A lot of this, we'll see major and minor projects. That took a little bit of tweaking. By and large is the same as it was previously. Next, please. Your application requirements, those didn't really change. Those stayed the same as they were per city process. We maybe just wordsmithed it a little bit to make it a little more user-friendly. Next, please. Design assistance. This didn't really change either, but we did add some digital footnotes for linking it to the city's website. And we did that throughout the project, or throughout the document, excuse me. On the cover sheet, you would see a QR code so that folks could hit the QR code with their mobile device and have the document at their fingertips in a relatively short amount of time. Next, please. So the next thing that we did was we wanted to develop an approach that did a couple of things. It more clearly defined regions in which these guidelines are to be upheld. We're calling them districts, but also to more clearly define what that means so that we can allow a little more latitude as we expand away from the central business district as well as the gateway corridors. So what's up here is the historic district, and that is, as it sounds, the central business district, as well as the prime corridors of travel that are the first things that people see when they come through Pella. To the far right is the elements that we feel embody the historic nature of what architectural design is and can be implemented with new commercial projects. As a side note, this is specific to the commercial sector. The residential sector has its own document. But we're essentially creating a tiered approach. Each tier would then have its own requirements and its own list of things to select from. Now, that's not to say that CDC would not allow other things to be submitted and not entertain those things. This is just sort of a starting point, right? Next, please. These two sheets, these are intended to be book bound. So the left sheet would be what we're calling District 2, that's the transitional district. And District 3 would be the contemporary district. So as you radiate out away from the city center, it gives you more latitude and it becomes less restrictive in terms of what historic elements you're required to implement. So the historic and the contemporary districts would then bookend the traditional, or the transitional, excuse me. And so what you'll see is a lot of overlap in the transitional between the historic and the contemporary, so that it allows that middle region to blend into the city center as you approach. Next, please. Now, the map, there was a memo submitted that outlined the purpose of the map. As the memo stated, we intentionally broadened the reach to the city limits and slightly beyond, where, as I understand it, the city has jurisdiction a certain extent beyond the city limits. So that was intentional on how we frame this. The green district in the center is obviously the historic, and that includes Main Street, north and south, from Pella Court up through the Central Business District, and along Washington, the primary approach. But as you get closer to 163, those become less restrictive. The blue or purplish region is the transitional, and so the intent there is to still allow for Dutch implementation, but also to allow some latitude that is less restrictive. And then once you get beyond it, the gray is the contemporary district, and this gives you the most latitude, so that as development occurs, we're not being overly restrictive, and the design guidelines aren't becoming cumbersome and costly for those developments. Next, please. We also upgraded the document with respect to large commercial buildings. In large part, this as well stayed intact. We did tweak a few things to make it a little bit more user-friendly. And we also added information specific to cart storage and other things of that nature, specific to the big box locations in town. Next, please. 360 architecture, also mentioned in the memo. This was the sort of last upgrade the town had to the design guidelines, at least. And this is largely intact as well, but tweaking it to more clearly define where 360 architecture is to be implemented. Again, we brought forward the elements that we thought were strong and supplemented that with additional information with regard to signage. Both monument signs and building signage are addressed here, and then they are the prohibited elements from the city ordinances are also outlined there. Next, please. These three are pretty much as they were, with the exception of number 10. Number 10 was a part of the large big box chapter previously, and both the committee and myself felt that it needed its own section because it is applicable to more than just large big box locations. Next, please. The color palette, again, we've linked it to the city's website. Those things will be finalized, and the peddlers section was rewritten, but has not changed in its intent. Next, please. Design review checklist. This is ordinance mandated, from my understanding, so the checklist has not changed either. Just a little bit of formatting and regrouped to coincide with the chapter divisions of the document. Next, please. Now, one of the things the CDC really was adamant about was implementation of more precedent imagery. There was a small amount in the previous edition of the document, but what we wanted to do was to give them more as a starting point for anyone doing development. So again, these are aligned with the districting. So these pair of pages is historic. Next, please. And then the left page represents the transitional, and the right page, while still a little light on content in terms of what's being allowed and the latitude that's being afforded to the contemporary piece. Next. I guess that's it. So again, in order to make this a usable document for the CDC, we were really trying to take what works, fix what doesn't, and give the community an overall identifying document that supports the proud heritage of the community. Thank you.
Probably want to give us a little chance if we have some questions.
Yep.
But I would like to add my thanks to the CDC for obviously this wasn't done overnight.
Yes. there
Spent a
was
lot
some
of time and
exhaustive
discussion. Thank you too. I assume you got paid. They didn't. But anyway, it took a lot. There was a lot of work that was obviously done here. So CDC deserves our thanks for spending the time to do all of this work. So I'll make sure express my appreciation for that. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I'm not you wouldn't want me to design anything, more or less. But I was wondering, was there any discussion, there's all in here about the structures and all of that. Was there any discussion about is there rural landscaping, things like that? The reason I asked that question, I was at Fairhaven East today talking to that wonderful group of people there. Somebody was asking about that, if there was any requirements for, the exterior buildings between the street and the buildings. And I don't know if that's in here or if that's something else, but.
Yeah, Jerry may be able to shed some light on it, but my understanding is that that's an ordinance-driven.
That is correct. Our zoning code currently has a landscape requirement section that all new development has to go to and abide by. So in the future, if there's everything we want to change or address with that concerning landscaping, it would be through that ordinance in the zoning code.
Okay, but that's not, CDC
Outside of
doesn't.
this scope.
Yeah, CDC doesn't. They're just the structures themselves.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
the intent is for this to be used in tandem with the code ordinances for all
Okay.
projects.
Okay, thank you. Sure, everybody else has questions.
I have a comment. I find the glossary very helpful.
Oh, yes,
I
the
think
glossary
that
was
was,
done in the
I don't know who had that idea, but kudos to
Oh,
them.
thank you.
And then question about existing businesses. Are they grandfathered in, or are they going to have to make changes according to this new document?
Yeah, no one will be required to make changes unless they have, unless they are making substantial changes to the external appearance of an existing building.
Okay, thank you.
And so that would either land in the major or minor, depending on the extent of the renovation.
All right, thank you. That's helpful.
I was just curious on the signage part of this, and I see here that the CDC approves signage, and I was thinking more. Was there any discussion about strengthening or putting parameters in? And the building I think of is the DeVita building, which is right in, and you don't have to know every building, but it's a building that's right next to residential buildings with a big internally lit sign.
Okay.
And are those determined on a case by case? When it goes through P&Z then, Gerald or Jerry, or how are those done, whether a sign is too glaring or too non-glaring, or when it's close to a residential district?
So our zoning code has a sign section in it outside of this document that covers all signage in the City of Pella that dictates size, height, width, length, all that. And then this document really is the design of the sign. So for a building like the Vita, the regular zoning code says you're allowed X by Y square feet, and what size it can be and how it can be mounted, and what kind of internal illumination. And then this document, normally would not cover that because historically that was outside of one of the districts. This new document would cover the the design of the building becomes the standard this citywide. So it would come under purview of CDC, and they could make a modification to make that sign blend in better.
So then what trumps then, the rules in the zoning or what the CDC board would think on that?
The zoning code, really think about it, is the legal limits of the sign. It can be, X feet wide, so high, it cannot exceed so many square foot, it can be mounted on the wall. That's what the zoning code states. This document then gets into, it should blend with the colors of the building. It should have this type of illumination. It gets into that document. So that's how you would blend the two together.
And would that possibly look at the neighborhoods too? What that would affect if there was residences close by?
Through this document, yes, they
Okay.
take that into consideration.
Yeah, and to add to what Jerry said, the CDC brought that up a number of times in our meetings to be able to use this document and to consider immediate adjacencies when doing so that they can give people latitude where it's needed, so that we don't end up with stepped gable after stepped gable all the way down the road, but also taking into account things that don't fall within the jurisdiction of this document, should they be adjacent to something that is.
Just to be, I do have just a clarification, just so everyone's on the same page. This document covers the design of entities that fall under the city's design ordinance right now, so our design review district. So Mandy, if we could show that district, please. So that would, the way it's written right now, the city's ordinance would be these green highlighted areas and along the corridor. So it's generally in commercial zoning districts, correct?
Yeah, it would work in tandem with your commercial zoning.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And in the case of DeVita, it's important to note that signage in that case, I believe that was institutional property, and it fell outside the purview of CDC, but it still went through the city's site planning process, and the signs would have had to meet city code as well for that as well.
So anything institutional is not governed by CDC?
That is correct,
Okay.
yes. It's generally commercial buildings that fall in commercial zones. That's governed by CDC.
So another question I had, I assume there was a lot of discussion about the zones, where they're going to go, and I guess I can't tell on this map, but the Oskaloosa Street, how far does that go? The historic district there, down Oskaloosa Street.
The historic district down at that little jog is bounded on the north by Huber, on the south by South Street, and on the east by Carson.
Carson?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I didn't know, Lynn, this would be of particular interest of you, who have
Right.
been working hard to talk about
Mhm.
redeveloping Oskaloosa Street.
Right.
Do you see any problems with that?
No, I really don't.
Okay.
That was the first thing I checked out. There are some existing buildings there that if we mandated architectural changes to their buildings, that it would probably be prohibitive for them to continue doing business on the corridor. But since they're grandfathered in, I'm fine.
Okay.
And I believe they'd be fine with that too.
Yeah, I just, didn't want to think about hampering potential
Yeah.
development
Right. Yeah.
because of that. which,
Exactly.
it's not that easy to get it developed anyway.
Exactly.
So I don't want to make any.
And then,
That's what I'm
Yeah.
not saying it's not the right thing to do, I just didn't know.
yeah, no,
I
it's
was
a good
particularly
question.
interested in what you thought.
Yeah.
because
Thank you
you've been
for asking.
You've been working on this for quite a while.
5 years. But who's counting, right?
Also to this map, obviously our west and southern entrances are involved in the transitional zone, I think it is.
Yes. the purple zone.
Granted, some of our eastern exit is very close to not inside of city limits even, but why wouldn't the purplish blue transitional extend to the eastern entrance?
I don't know.
Zoning isn't commercial currently, or?
Is it a zoning?
Well, isn't just in answering the question, and maybe Jerry and Kurt can help me out. But this is district number 2, but going out to the eastern entrance, the way I read it, it would be the contemporary zone. So
Yes.
it would be different standards, it'd be more contemporary. And a good example of this, the way I'm reading this ordinance, would be on the west side when you go out to the Prairie Ridge commercial development, for instance, and you look at Smash Park, Chick-fil-A, it's more of a contemporary architectural feel. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the intent? Is just to have more contemporary right around the interchanges out there.
I think you mentioned in your presentation, part of the heart behind doing this is to kind of hint at that Dutch historical as you enter into the CBD kind of area. But there are people coming from that direction as well. I'm fine with the contemporariness of it, but just like our western entrance, west half is contemporary, east half is transitional. I don't know if I'm arguing for one or the other. I'm just curious as to why it didn't get to the eastern exit.
Yeah, I think now that I fully understand what you're asking, I think the intent was that you would come into town in a more contemporary fashion and transition into the historic as you get closer to the town center. The gateway corridors, so to speak, had already been established by previous editions, and so those parts were carried forward. But the decision was made to stop the historic zone where we did, given the current buildings that are east of there. So while there are entrances there, the Washington Street entrance and the south entrance are considered a little more prominent, I guess, in terms of the more frequented paths of approach.
I would guess I'd push a little bit on that because I think that's going to change with university going east, et cetera. Maybe I'm even backwards arguing that perhaps the contemporary ought to be on the east side of our western entrance or on the north side of our southern entrance and maybe not be so transitional towards that. To be consistent or vice versa.
Yeah. Well, and to reiterate something that was in the council memo, we really do look at this as an evolving document, a document that can be tweaked minimally to better serve your needs. So in this case, all of the tiered requirements would stay the same. Should you need to upgrade it, you would change the boundaries of the map at some point in the future, insert that sheet into the document, and it would require minimal effort to more specifically tailor it to where development is happening. So while it doesn't do that now, and we can sure talk about why it should now, but the idea being that we could evolve the map as we need to.
Jerry, on just that moment, if you would grade lately right now, would it fit contemporary or transitional under these standards?
One thing I think Mike was going to address on the last slide, but I'll kind of step in here, is that what the concept of the document, previous version versus this new version. Previous version was limited to those scopes, those corridors and commercial zones. And that really kind of hand-tied the city for implementation of the future. This document goes citywide. And what it allows is the council at any time in the future to pick and choose as new development arises to point them to this document to implement that. So now we have complete citywide coverage. It won't affect all the areas of the city because most of it is residential, but still, as we transition from residential to commercial, it will, obviously then fall under the jurisdiction of this document. One thing we have to realize is our current M zones, our industrial zones, are not subject to the design guidelines. What we're asking for in the future, or in the near future, is to change that to reference M1 zones fall under this, because we've had recent council, conditional zoning, which have pointed and made them follow this, so that's a logical movement forward. But historically, M2 or heavy industrial will never fall into these. So M2 is your Lely, M2 is your Vermeer, M2 is your Pella corridor, M2 is the corridor along where the cement plant is. So a lot of that will never ever fall into this. But in the future, we would like the M1 zones that you see. We've actually had, like Van Gorp has gone through this on a voluntary basis. They didn't have to go through the CDC design criteria when they did some work at the facility. Went through voluntarily. So that kind of is what we're looking for, and it's very encouraging when you have local businesses voluntarily go through a requirement to add that. So that's why we believe the M1 zone is a perfect, ultimately, to fall underneath here. So hopefully I answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you did.
Anything else?
An opinion for what it's worth. What's still missing is really nice signs at our entrances that would set the tone for what you're going to find as you move in towards the historic district. I mean, you go to small communities and they have impressive welcome signs.
Mhm.
I think that's a very good point, and as you're aware, we've had those discussions in the past, and maybe we're planning on
Lingering out there for years.
Yeah, it's been lingering, and maybe the appropriate time is we're going to be meeting, it looks like in late March, to discuss the city's budget. Maybe that's an appropriate time to talk about community entrance signage once again.
Well, it has no place if, budgets are tight, but it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry.
No, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I think, if I remember correctly, I thought Paceman was going to address the signs. I'm going from an aging memory though, so. But my
Could we have
question
Bruce
is-
come and speak at the
Yeah, people,
podium, please?
Yeah, that's fine. Actually, I'd like to address some of you, Mike, also. Am I understanding that M1 here will fall under the scrutiny of CDC then? Is that correct?
No, that was, just to answer the question, the CDC is not expanding CDC's purview through this process, and to explain what this slide is about. CDC has asked and would like to have the discussion whether it makes sense to include M1 districts that are currently fall in design review districts, whether they should be under the purview of CDC. And the reason for that is over this past 24 months, we've had 3 rezonings of property that are, I'd say, fairly highly visible from gateway corridor districts that went from commercial to, and well, in one case was commercial to M1. The other one was ag to M1 that I recall offhand. And what we did as part of the rezoning process is we had design guidelines in for those buildings. And so I think the thought was of CDC, if we've already done this 3 times in the last 24 months, does it make sense to have a discussion at the council level whether we should formally make adoption for those M1 districts that are on the gateway corridor and whether they should be under CDC's purview for new M1 industrial buildings?
I really don't. I'm sorry. I really don't have a problem. I agree with Consult and CDC and planning and zoning. It looks to me like a lot of it's based upon corridors, 163 corridor, Washington Street corridor, and I'm all for nice-looking corridors. But this covers all of M1, and I wonder if it might not be a better alternative to have M1 that falls within a corridor. That way, the visual can still be done, but you're not placing additional encumbrances on M1 possible businesses that could move in. Just a thought.
But, yeah, Mike, how is that received by the businesses that had to all of a sudden have.
Yeah, that would be part of the process
Yeah.
on it. And but again, this is the initial concept discussion, whether we should or shouldn't look at it. But if we were to do this, what would have to happen if we were going to include one property that's in a gateway corridor, to require an ordinance change? And before something like this, it would go through planning and zoning, and of course, before it got to planning and zoning, that proposed ordinance would be reviewed by CDC, and then of course the City Council would have 3 public readings on it, so there'd be lots of public input solicited on design guideline changes or expansion of design guidelines. And really what we're here tonight is we're interested to know, would council like to have that discussion, and if we should come back and schedule a more formal session where we could talk about this concept, expanding the CDC's purview to include M1 property that abuts a gateway corridor that's adjacent to it, a gateway corridor.
Okay, anything else? So what, where are we going from here? You just said whether we want to have a more, more in-depth discussion about that particular item, but the document that we're here, I assume at some point the council would have to approve it as written if we wanted, right? Or-
Yeah. What'll happen next, Mr. Mayor, is I believe on March 7th, we'll have a resolution formally adopting this document. So this will be adopted as is. If we don't hear any changes tonight, it'll be presented for council's consideration on March 7th. If we want to have additional discussions on M1 and whether they should or shouldn't be under the purview of CDC, in which districts it makes sense. For instance, we've thrown out M1 that abuts or that's in a current gateway corridor district. We could schedule that for a future policy and planning meeting at the city council level, and that would be the initial discussion.
Okay. So everybody understands that. So if there's anything in here that causes you to not support it, then we could go back to CDC or whatever. Does everybody understand that?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. All right, and then we will move to policy and planning, discuss sidewalk inspection repair program updates.
Oh, yes, Mr. Mayor, and I'll chime in here, but I'm going to ask Jerry to also add any details that I may be overlooking. But as council is aware, this past year we've resumed the sidewalk inspection program. It's important to note that previously in 2018 and 2019, we conducted inspections in the northeast and northwest quadrants of the city. And generally, when you look this past year, we inspected the southwest portion of the city, which is this green highlighted area. And it's generally the area that's located west of Main Street and south of Washington Street that we had. Now, overall, when we conducted this sidewalk inspection, we noted defective panels or panels that did not meet city code requirements. There were 773 defective panels when we initially inspected the project. And property owners were given until this past December 27th to make repairs. And as of this date, we have approximately 438 panels that are still needed for repair. So what we're here to talk about this evening is to answer any questions that council may have on those defective panels that are still outstanding. But generally, what we intend to do is the same process that we followed in 2018 and 2019. What we were going to do is we're going to solicit bids from a contractor to go out and repair those panels. And that's the timeline that we're looking at as far as the panels. We anticipate issuing an RFP for the panel replacement in March of this year. Hopefully we'll be able to have a contract approved sometime by the spring. What we have as far as our timeline, as far as this September, is the contractor would complete all the repairs to the defective panels. Once the repairs are completed, we will come back to council and set the assessment amount for each property owner. And hopefully not hopefully, but tentatively we have planned by late September, we'll send a notice of the assessment out to each property owner. And then on October of this year, the county treasurer will be notified of any unpaid amounts, and it will be assessed through the annual property taxes. Now, it is important to note, as go through this process and what's been done in the past, is that council may allow assessments greater than $500 to be paid in 10 annual installments, and those were the provisions that were established by previous councils on this. So what we're really here to talk about this evening, before we start this process, to start soliciting bids for a contractor to complete these repairs, we wanted to make sure we addressed any questions or concerns that council may have on the project, as well as far future action steps that we just outlined up on the big board. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm more than happy to answer any questions the council may have on this item.
All right.
This is just mirroring what we've done in the past, right? And that seems to have worked well. There hasn't been big problems with that, right?
Yeah, I would say the process has worked fairly smoothly from the city's perspective, but I would encourage Jerry to add to any detail that council should be aware of.
Absolutely, it's a very successful program. I mean, you can see by the fact that 335 people have voluntarily replaced their panels without us being involved. What I also like to point out is that we take IOUs. You know, we're not in the banking industry, but we take IOUs. So we've had numerous citizens come into the department and state, you know, I work with contractor X. They're busy. It's wintertime. I can't do this. But what we ask them to provide us is a letter from contractor X stating that they bid the panels, and we give them basically a second go around. So of the numerous panels that are left available, a lot of those actually have IOUs on them that said we've already contracted with this, paid with this contractor. He's going to fix it as soon as spring comes. So we hope the number will drop down, and that just shows you the success of this program is.
So I think I remember this, but the request for proposal was kind of on a panel basis, right?
It is.
So that, because if we go out in March, you're not gonna know the final count, but it will be on a per panel basis, right?
Per panels, per square foot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, this is the third of 4 quadrants, and the first 2, I think we need to do it the same way we did the other 2. Anybody have a problem with that? Okay. All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
Bannister, Spore, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the vote.
DeAnstrup.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes?
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes. We are adjourned. Thank you.